Hello everyone, thanks for checking out this video. I'll be quickly going through 6 tips to increase the quality of your graphics while using Smartbuild. Maybe a few others that I'll mention along the way, but it's going to be a quick video. Again, we'll get right to it. Starting out with the first one, we want to look at a project that I have here in front of us, and you can see the steel looks pretty good. You're not dealing with any girts showing through, things like that, and that's the first topic that we want to look at. When I look at another model, this is very common when I'm working with a customer and I look at their database and we see something like this. So first we're going to focus on these girt lines and what is that and why are we seeing that? So it's really easy fix, pretty quick. You can go into your materials, and a lot of this tutorial we're going to be going to this area. So you need to have an admin permission to get to this. So it's in settings and materials. When you get to that point, you go to the sheetings tab. So from there, obviously we have to find our sheeting part that we're dealing with, double click on it, and you see all the properties of that sheeting. So we're just going to focus on one part here in this step. Some of the other steps we'll be getting into other parts of it, but it's dimension 3 that we're looking at. And very commonly, some people think this may be the gauge or the thickness of the steel itself. And in Smartbuild, we're actually looking for the overall profile thickness, as in with the rib profile and everything, so the total thickness. So when I set this dimension, I like to normally set it to 3/4 inch or in decimal 0.75. And again, that should do it. Just scroll to the bottom, click save. Very quick and easy. And when you get back to your job, you'll notice that if you update your model after saving, and what's nice is if you're working in 2 different tabs, when you work in 2 different tabs like this, the materials info that you update automatically updates in your job. So as soon as you save that and you refresh your job, it will go ahead and show you the changes. And we'll use that feature to fix some of the other steps in the next parts of the video. So you can see it easy to clean that up. Now I also mentioned that it does affect the steel length. So in this project here, probably not so much, but when you have a no overhang structure and your project has steel that comes down your wall thickness. So when we're adding a thicker wall steel, since this is a 3D model, it actually does count that steel as part of the wall. So it has to cover the edge of the wall. So your steel on the roof may get a bit thicker, or the steel on the sidewall, when it comes up to meet that plane, may get a bit shorter because it's hitting. So again, not a big deal after you set your thicknesses. Check your steel lengths in the job review, go to sheeting, check your steel lengths, make sure it's still right. And if not, you can always go to your wall sheeting settings in details. You can go to your wall sheeting and you can adjust the margins and set them accordingly, just to double check it and make sure you have what you need. So again, that's the first one. That is adjusting your sheeting thickness. Very quick and easy. And I also mentioned if you don't want to go through that step, another way that you can get your models nice and clean is simply by clicking and turning off the frame. So when you click the frame button, it hides all the wood framing in the job besides the open posts. So when you do that, any girts that would have been showing through would also disappear. It's a little bit easier, but it's something you have to do every time, and it also doesn't carry through when you do a quote, so your images may not look as clean. So again, that's the first one. We'll move on to number 2. So with number 2, there is another video you can check out on our YouTube channel. It is called Updating Your Framing Colors, but we'll quickly cover it here. There's 2 different ways you can do it. I'm going to be doing it in the Materials tab in this video. So looking at this model, you can see all the wood is basically the same color, or all the dimensional products. And looking at another model where I actually have the colors set up, you can see my posts have a color, they have another color at the bottom, which that's a separate topic we'll cover. And then we have treated wood at the bottom here. We have some engineered wood headers across these door openings, and then the detailed trusses. So again, just a lot more detail in this model, more realistic. So pretty easy to do this one the same way. You go into your Materials tab. This time will be in framing, and you just find each framing part. Click on the part, and again, you kind of see the part here, but scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll see a framing color. You can simply set that color, click save, and then revisit your model and your colors will update. Now in the other video that I did, you can do all this in the setup wizard. You can work in Excel and you can save yourself some time. So check out that if you want to do it a bit quicker. So we'll move on to number 3. So we are ready for number 3 here, and we will be going through the trim dimension setup. This model here, the trim dimensions are set up pretty well. Flipping the screen here over to this model, you'll see like my valley trim's extra large. My window door and door trim seems a little large for what I'm used to seeing. Maybe yours is that large. This overhead door trim dimension's messed up. And we'll be going into materials, the materials section again. So settings, materials, find the trim that you're looking for. You can sort by clicking on the description. If you want to sort by alphabetical order, just scrolling down, finding the valley trim. That's what I have mine called. And I have this dimension 1 set to 18 inch. So I'm going to open this up. And 18 inch may be the overall width of it. In this case, Smartbuild is just wanting to know what the reveal is in the model. So I'm going to set that to about 2 inches, maybe 3 inches total reveal. And we can go back into the job and I'll refresh this and we'll see what we get. What we'll see is this is going to shrink down and it looks more like the valley that you're expecting to see with a standard ag panel installation. So yeah, that looks more realistic. So next, moving to the windows, just looking at those, again, if you're using a J trim or a standard window trim around those, maybe you're expecting to see kind of more like I have here on the overhead door. So just check your trim that you're using, find that trim. You can go into, again, follow the same steps, sort by description, scroll down, find the trim. In this case, it is a J channel trim that I'm using. And it's common to use, set that to a 1 inch or a 0.75, 3/4 inch, whatever looks best, and you can use your own judgment there. It does not affect the material, the sheeting lengths in any way. So this trim is purely for a visual, a nice visual. So again, that is that. That's how you can clean up your window trims. Corner trims very much the same. When you set your corner trim, we look at, I'll go to exterior corner trim, you set it to your product or your assembly that you have, and you can find that product. So when I find my outside corner, I have some that are 5.75 or 6, and then dimension 2 is usually around an inch or so, giving it a thickness. So dimension 2, what that does is it gives it a profile of sticking out a bit. So one question that comes up a lot when talking to customers about setting up trims is Smartbuild assumes a profile by the usage. And by that I mean if you tell us it's a corner trim or an outside corner or a gable edge trim here or a top of wall trim or a base trim, we assume a certain profile. And again, the profile isn't that important. We just try to get to make the model look accurate. So the profile doesn't do much when it comes to affecting the material. It just helps it, and we want to have it as close as possible. So a lot of these original profiles were set up in the beginning, and they just we haven't done any more work on that. So again, that's how those dimensions work. So you can't adjust the angle, but when you do find a trim, like an overhead door trim, corner trim, whatever, depending on where it's being used in the model, that will affect what dimension 1 and dimension 2 do. And another reason that's important, and I'm pointing that out, is if we look at this overhead door here, it is flush. And we're going to talk about how to set back those doors later or how to set up these models. But if I spin around to this door, notice how it's recessed into the model. And I'm using a one piece and it may be a 2-piece overhead door trim that you're using, either way. But if you want to recess those models, which we'll talk about, the thing to look at though is your trim. When you look at your overhead door trim, the header and the trimmer, which are the trims going across the top and the sides, when you look at those trims, dimension 1 and 2 do different things based off the usage. So if it's a header trim and a trimmer trim, dimension 1 and 2 have to do with how far it's getting set back and how far that is on the face. So again, if you're using a 1-piece or a 2-piece, either way, if you look at the header setting, the trimmer setting, the top jamb, and the side jamb, those 4 settings working together along with these dimensions, you can do different things and give it a 3D. You can give it a 3D dimensional look like this by utilizing the right dimensions. So it's really easy. Again, pick your trim. You can either set dimension 1 or 2, switch them around if it doesn't look right, and just play around with it depending on your trim that you have. So again, it's not that hard to change. In this case, I would take my overhead door trim. If it doesn't look right, change dimension 1 to 9.5 and change dimension 2 to 1. So just flip those and then refresh your model, see if it looks better. And again, it may be an issue that we're going to talk about next, where your doors are just not recessed. They need to be recessed back into the model. And if I go inside the building, you can see a little bit more what I'm talking about. So the trim is there. The trim is on that face of the post or the column. but the door is set out too far, and so you can't see it, and then it doesn't give it that 3D look. One other thing worth mentioning when we're looking at trim dimensions is the fascia and soffit. So it's really common. Sometimes you'll see some lumber sticking out here on the gable edge. Kind of see it over here too. And what we're doing and what's happening there, let me explain a little bit. Backing up, the way that Smartbuild measures, when we look at our roof trims and the gable edge trim, so we're talking about a gable edge trim here, and let's say that your gable edge trim is coming down 5 or 6 inches. So it's coming down from the edge of the roof down 5 inches. So what we're doing with fascia is kind of the same thing. With my gable fascia, if I select a product that's 3.5 inches, originally Smartbuild was, the code was written to measure down 3.5 inches, and then that's where your soffit goes in from. So we understand that when you actually install this product, you're actually coming up from the bottom. So it's a little bit tricky. So when you set up your fascia dimension, even though in this case it's 3.5 fascia, it has a 5.5 coverage maybe because it doesn't have to start at the top, it's starting at the bottom. So in order to get around that, sort of a workaround is to one thing you can do is go into your materials and just set your 3.5 fascia to be larger than what it actually is. So if I set this to 6 inches and update that, when I go back into my job and if I were to refresh this model, what it will do is it will bring that fascia down, but it's also going to move my soffit down, which also affects my steel length. So again, this is something that when you start adjusting and making changes to your fascia trims, you have to be aware and dial in your siding, your sheeting, your wall sheeting, and just make sure that it's still the length that you want, or adjust the margins accordingly. So now the model looks better. You can see the wood's no longer showing. All I did was increase the fascia dimension there. So again, that's number 3. We'll keep moving. With number 4, the title there may seem a little overwhelming, but we'll dive into it. It won't be too hard. For an example, I'll toggle this roof off and we'll take a look at the subfloor or the OSB that I have. And you can see it has lettering, pretty detailed, looks realistic. But when I go into my other model and look at the loft, I see this is something I see all the time. When I look at the subfloor, or anytime they're representing OSB in a job, I get these little squares and it's not scaled properly. And we're going to talk about how to fix that. So going to materials, again, settings, materials, we find this item, and I'm just using this plywood as an example. And you can see when you open this up what you're getting. So what's really easy, you can play around with the scaling, and I'm going to talk about how to do that, but it's really easy. If you have your own image, you'll have to figure out the scale. But if you're using one of our stock images, these exact scale ratios will work. So in this case, everything's set to 1:1. So I'm just scrolling down. Go down to where you see a color map. It says OSB with letters. So this is one that we've preloaded in here that you can use. And then we need to figure out what this color map is. So again, just for reference here, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at one of my others that's already set up properly, and it'll be much easier. So here we have a sheet of OSB, and you can see this is scaled properly. This looks very close to the way it's rendered in the model that we looked at before. So again, we have to make sure that the dimensions are set up properly. And again, that's something, it's kind of getting off our topic here, but you obviously have to start in your setup wizard. You do have to make sure that your OSB is set up properly. And we normally do a coverage width of around 48 inches. And then the part length is the 8-foot way. So it's 48 inches and then it's 8 foot. So again, getting back to our scaling part here. So we have 48 inches here, and then just scrolling down to this color map, here is the ratio that we need to use. So it's 10.1, 4. So it's stretching it both ways. So we have a standard picture of an OSB sheet, and Smartbuild uses this scale to scale it to fit into the model on a 4x8 sheet. And then there's also a rotation here. So with this image and the way that it was saved in the Smartbuild, there's a -90. So what I would recommend is just taking this and looking at these settings and copying it exactly for your OSB. When you do that and you run a job and you update your model, you should see OSB that looks just like this. And then you can use that same process for other types of products. I've even used it to set up to render like flooring or decking. You can you can show about anything. If you have the image, you can show it rendered in Smartbuild on here. Here's a quick example of showing a cedar flooring look. And you could use that again. You could use that on any product to render about any look that you want, as long as you have the image and then you set the scale on the color map to fit. So one other thing while we're in here and we're talking about color maps, we also want to talk about bump maps. And with that, the bump maps are part of the 3D model that when you go back and you look at like this model here, we're not using a color map to render ag panel and steel like that. We're just using a bitmap to show where Smartbuild can actually overlay a color across it. So we're just showing a profile and then we're coloring that profile. So we don't want to use a color map in that case. We want to be able to change the color in Smartbuild, so we only use a bump map. And this is a case where if I go to my ag panel, it's probably the most commonly used example. And this ag panel here has not been set up properly yet. And if you look at it, you may say, well, most ag panels have five large panels across the width on 3 feet. And this image was loaded and it was never set to scale. So when I scroll down, I go to the bump map, you can see ag panels selected. This is a stock profile you can use. And the bump map is 1 to 1. And if you just switch this to 0.751, you'll see what it did. It actually added another rib. So it's not using full width. It scaled it down, and now we have 5 ribs. So that would actually be accurate when you're in a model. If you're rendering ag panel, that's the ratio you would want to use, 0.75 to 1. And obviously there's others in here. If you look at board and batten, maybe you're using a 10-inch or 12-inch panel. That one's really common. We have some profiles in here, and you can play around with it to get the best look that you like. Again, there's some stock profiles. So I have one in there that's called BB Smooth, which is smooth board and batten. Here's the best bump map size that I have found to fit when you're using a 12-inch wide with a 14 total wide panel. So if your panel is a little bit different, you may have to play around with this scale. And then the offset does something a little bit different. So if we look at this, depending on how the image was taken, if we set this to 0, watch what happens. So it moves this over. So if you play around with this, you'll see that it moves the profile around. So you can move it till you get it right to the edge, something that whatever what do you want to see. You can just play around with it. And the idea is then it repeats this throughout a job, and that's the look that we're seeing here. So again, that's a really quick rundown of bump maps and color maps. You can get more technical, I know, when it comes to rendering stone profiles, but it's still the same exact process. You have to go through, select your color map, and then set the scale to get it to look the way that you want. Next up on our list is overhead doors, windows, walk doors, and how do we make them look better? Maybe get them looking something like this model here. And if you're using Smartbuild for a while, maybe your doors kind of look just a flat sheet or something like this, and looked a little plain, and you're ready to dive in and spend a little bit more time, this will be a good video for you. This section will be. So when I look at this door here that I have, it's just a flat slate, wasn't never set up properly. But when I go into our door configurator, you find this in settings, and you go to doors and windows, and then just find the door model that you want. In this case, I have a 2250 10x8. First thing I'm going to do is just delete out the model and everything. So both of the 3D model and the scale here are empty. So the next thing is select a 3D model. And you can search for all types of models. I'm going to search for a CC model. And CC just means it's color coded. And if you're like, what does that mean? Well, again, we can get into that, but I'm just trying to get through this quick as we can. Basically, color coded means that you can have an accent one color in the job, and it can control the color of the door. So if I want to update to a black door or charcoal door, or any color door, I can simply change this setting in the model. And by doing that, I'm using all color coded models. So any model that you find in our database that has a CC behind it, that means it's color coded, and it will be controlled by the accent color one. So again, it's a nifty feature we've added more recently. We're still doing some more work on that related to door and window colors, but that's the way that it works as of today, where you can have all your doors and windows one color, controlled by one setting. So just getting back to that, if I pick any one of these doors, and there's a lot in here when you look at the CC, I'm just going to pick this raised panel CC and hit select. So when I do that, it comes in way too large. It looks like it's, if you zoom out, you can kind of see the whole door. It's not scaled. So we click this automatic scale button. It says fit, and it fits it. Now again, this is just making it flush. We're still not done yet. So there's one more step, and we center it. So when we click center, it centers it in the opening, and all models may be different, but this centers it. This is 3 numbers here, and when you look at these numbers, they're very long numbers, but it's not as complex as it looks. So we have 3 numbers divided, and they're all have a comma between them. So I find the last number after the comma, and I want to just switch this and say, well, how far do I want to recess my doors? And I may say 6 inches. Well, think of this as in decimal feet. So I put a negative 0.5 into this, and I click save. So now what it did was it moved that door back, and you have to do this. I'm going to find this door again. So when I open this door, now you'll see that it's been recessed. So unfortunately, you have to save it to see the changes. But again, that really makes a difference in your models, and it gets you that look that your doors are actually recessed back into the model. And we can do a lot more training on setting up doors and windows, but that was the one trick that a lot of people have asked for recently, or 2 tricks, basically the color coding, find a CC model, and then the next one is you need to center it and then take that last number in your translation there and change it to whatever you want to recess it. So again, there's not a quick fix to do this to all your doors, so you do have to spend a little bit of time to go through and do that. But once it's done, and you can have nice doors in your model. We are ready for our last section here. We'll be wrapping it up. So this one here, realistic trusses, something that really can make a difference in your model if you're showing the customer the interior and the layout like that. And when we look at these trusses in this model, there's even some attic trusses. So you can do different styles. It just all comes down to when you're in the model and you dial your trusses in, or you set this structure or this project exactly the way that you're going to frame everything. Then when you go to your job review and you go into the trusses section, we have this list of trusses. Now, if I just pick these 4 here and look, you can see what's in my catalog versus, what's in catalog here versus what it's looking for. So what I can do is at any time, again, you have to be an admin to be able to do this. You can go through and add these trusses to your table and then maintain them going forward, maintain the price going forward. So it's as simple as click add to table. I'm going to do 2 of these and you'll see the difference. So add to table. And then when I refresh my job, I'm not going to do all of them so you can see the difference. But when I refresh my job, it actually renders those trusses. Now it's not 100% accurate of the way that truss will be built. Obviously, we're not engineering the truss in this space, but we do render it to get it close. Looks more like a truss there. So we do have the task feature, which is another whole topic where we interface with the Simpson truss design, and it actually does design the truss and bring it back. So that's a separate feature. If you're rendering your trusses in Smartbuild that way, it is a little more advanced, but you actually see the clips and things right on the trusses, and that visual would be accurate. In this case, quick and easy. If you want to add trusses to your catalog this way and get a perfect match, you can do that. And then obviously you just have to follow back and go into your truss section and make sure that these trusses get updated, with your pricing monthly or however you update it. So again, really quick and easy one there to add trusses to your catalog. And again, they have to be a perfect match or they show up as an orange triangle. Small detail makes a big difference. So just wrapping it up, I hope everyone has enjoyed this. A couple other things, just finishing up with, little tricks that people do. We have obviously have these landscape settings here. You can turn on trees and shadows and sky. So some of these settings here you can adjust if you're wanting to mix up your graphics a bit. And another common trick that I use when I am trying to take a really high resolution photo of this project. So what you can do is if you go to your job tab and just hover over this job menu and hold control on your mouse and start zooming out and roll down on your mouse. And when you do that, it changes your zoom resolution of the model. So you can see it keeps getting clearer and the resolution gets higher. So again, that's a really neat trick that you can use. And then I just use a snipping tool to take the picture. So, you can screenshot any section of the model that way. So again, I hope this helps everyone, and we'll see you next time. God bless.